Hi everyone, welcome to the DiscoveryLab series.
Hi.
We have some wonderful guests here today from the Firewheel Nursery, and my phone is going off telling me someone's trying to message me at the same time. However, I would like to introduce to you today these beautiful authors of the Australian Rainforest Seeds, a guide to collecting, processing and propagation. So Michelle Chapman is our first
Hi.
Hello. Just have to get my so Michelle, I'm going to talk a little bit about you first, but so just your background to introduce you. You're a pioneer of several worldwide forest restoration projects and founder of Seed Tree Maps. And then we'll have Mark. Mark's background is in ecological restoration. And owner of the Firewheel Rainforest Nursery, and an avid rainforest regenerator. Great. And Steve is a plant grower for the past 50 years, but also has a lot of experience with fauna and flora in terms of surveys, working for botanical gardens, nurseries, and even zoos. So such a great resourceful group you guys are. So Michelle, maybe we'll start with you first. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you come to do what you do and to eventually writing the book?
My background's pretty straightforward, actually. Like, I was just traveling around the world and teaching. I was a primary school teacher and drama teacher, and I was always doing kind of the ecological stuff in the school, getting the recycling going, you know, getting the gardens going. And then eventually I went to this conference called Sustainably Africa in Cape Town in 2012, and I heard all about, you know, the sixth grade extinction and climate change, and just some of the speakers, they were really inspiring, and they said, like, if you want to make a difference, you need to get on the green train. You need to. One guy said everyone should be a scientist, and we need to plant more trees. And I guess both of those things I took on board, and I was ready to sort of move out from mainstream teaching. So I ended up getting a really cool job with a group called Green Pop, which is a grassroots tree planting organisation, just started by a couple of people who were in the documentary filmmaking industry that felt really bad about all the air miles, and so they just started planting trees and getting the community involved and raising money online, and they needed someone to run workshops and do it in a bit more of an educational way, and to have a bit of quality control on what they were doing. And so, yeah, I guess I just sort of jumped on board with that, and that just kind of reinforced my passion for forests. And then my visa ran out, and so I came back to Australia, and I really wanted to know more about, like, planting the right trees in the right place, and wanted to know more about how forests work and how trees work, and I was really ready to learn. So I came to study environmental science in Lismore at Southern Cross University, and I just absolutely loved learning about all that. And as part of that, I got really fascinated by rainforest seeds, because my real love is subtropical rainforest. I grew up in national parks up around Lamington National Park, just behind the Gold Coast, and so I just felt like I wanted to know more about how to grow trees, and so I got involved with this project. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. What about yourself, Mark?
It's really, like, I'm not really a scientist. Like, I'm sort of at the beginning of learning about botany and learning about science. I was just really, it was more of an active citizenship, you know, just knowing I needed to get more involved, and this is how I got involved.
So that's pretty amazing. I think, you know, the fact that the progression of it is really lovely, like seeing that you worked with kids first, but then you started to getting this interest in nature that rekindled, I guess, from your childhood as well, having always been around rainforest.
Yeah.
And so how did it come about that you ended up sort of writing the book? Is the book, it's obviously a labor of love between many of you guys, you know, collaborating together, but at the same time, how did you sort of, was there like a huge progression? Like, how long did it take for you guys to even come up with the idea and then actually having this book published. Like, it sounds like a huge feat of strength.
Yeah, well, shall I answer that? Did you want it from me? Yeah, so it sort of just started as so so Mark had been intending to write the book for a long time, and I just happened to go to a workshop at this great event that happens every 2 years down here, the Big Scrub Rainforest Day, where Mark was doing a workshop on seed propagation, and I just saw that lots of people were asking questions and they were holding up seeds and were like, tell us more, and where's the pamphlet, where's the brochure? And Mark was like, yes, we're going to do a book. And I guess in my mind, something just went off, because I've been, doing my degree. I was in the second year. I was thinking, oh, yes, we could collect that data. That'd be really great. And so I just saw the need, and I guess it's my education background. I just saw some people who need to know something and people who know something, and let's try put that together. So I just started coming once a week to, just do species by species, how to collect and how to propagate. And it just sort of naturally rolled on. And we just started creating a spreadsheet, really. And then someone had the bright idea, Shannon Greenfield, who works for Big Scrub Land Care Group, she had the bright idea of that we should actually write a proposal to a publishing company and see if we can't get it made into a book. And so we just went for gold, went for CSIRO, and they went for it. So after that, we sort of realized, all right, we better do a good job of it. And then we ended up giving ourselves a whole lot more work. So doing the introductory chapters, a whole chapter on collecting and a whole chapter on the processing that we were talking about, and storage, and a lot of issues around sustainability and genetic diversity. And we had a lot more research to do, so it took us a lot longer than we thought, 2.5 years. Yeah, but we did it. Yeah.
Show us the book. Show us the book. I would like to. I'd like to talk to. Great, thank you, Steve. That's great. Yeah. Oh, I shouldn't talk when that happens. Sorry. No. We missed it because of my blabber. Anyway, Mark, tell us more. Maybe just about yourself first of all, and then a little bit about the book. But so, what's your background is in obviously growing plants for a long time now, and you've got this nursery. Tell us about how that happened and about the nursery itself.
Yeah, well, I also had an interest in rainforests from an early age, and came up here because of my interest in rainforest when I was young, and got into studying ecology and the whole rainforest conservation preservation debate going on in Terania Creek. And so I was had a definite interest and love for the rainforest. And then I discovered restoration, the whole science of ecological restoration or bush regeneration, which didn't exist up until the mid-80s, really. And that was like a green light going on for me. And it was like, wow, this is what I want to do, So I got into that, and there wasn't much work going on, but I stuck to it, and I've been doing it for 30, 40 years now. And in that time, developed a whole range of jobs for national parks and councils and private landowners. And we planted tens of thousands of trees, up to hundreds of thousands of trees, and we had worked out all the different techniques for growing and creating rainforests, restoring remnants, removing weeds. The whole industry grew from there, and we needed trees to grow, so we started the nursery. We didn't know how to collect seeds or process them or germinate them, but over the years we developed techniques. We started writing down the techniques, had great seed collectors, and Steve came along at some point, and he helped with the data collection, and we started thinking that, oh, this is all valuable information. We should get it out there. People were asking us questions. People really wanted to know how to do it. And we were like, we're going to write a book. We're going to write a book. And we were collecting information. But it was all fairly haphazard up until Michelle came along and Steve came along. And they really made that process concrete, and we really got it down knuckled down to really collecting hard data, accurate data, and it took more than 2 years, 3-4 years to really of hard work, like every 1 day a week or 2 days a week of collecting this information, and finally getting the book published. So it's a wealth of all our knowledge over 30+ years. Yeah, so very proud of it.
Yes, so you should be. It sounds like an amazing book with so much experience of people's individual experiences with seeds. And I mean, it's so hard. Everyone always talks about how hard it is to propagate rainforest seeds. Steve, would you like to share with us your experience, your background, which sounds really interesting, as well as your journey with the book?
Sure. Got a long history of growing Australian native plants. I've always been interested. As a kid, where I grew up in Sydney, it was still a lot of bushland. There was a creek running through the middle of our street, and I just grew up, even though I grew up in Sydney, I grew up in the bush, and I grew up to have a love of all the plants and animals and just a passionate interest in them. And that turned into me when I was a young teenager. I started growing native plants and selling them to my mother's friends. And I've just, as I say, grown plants all my life, basically. And I've been interested in Australian plants and animals all my life. We moved up to the north coast from Central Australia. We moved here about 20 years ago, and I got to know Mark then because we lived just across the road from the nursery. And then we went off and did all these other adventures and moved back here about 3 years ago. And I was very lucky that Mark needed someone at the time to grow trees for him in his nursery. So I just slotted back in here to the north coast, collecting seeds and growing trees, and there probably can't be a better job than that.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like getting your hands dirty is the most rewarding thing you can do, but at the same time, you know, helping people to discover how to do it themselves is another fascinating aspect of it. And so I guess that's where the book comes in. And tell us more about the book, guys. What are the chapters like? Like, what is Michelle's already mentioned sort of the background of the book and the different aspects that needed to be covered. What are some of the most exciting things you have come across while writing and that you would like to share with us now?
Well, I found it quite exciting when I've always wanted to know what was going on in the world out there, and because we live in this little bubble of seed collecting, and I've always wanted to know what the rest of the world is doing. And so Michelle did a literature search to discover what else people are doing in Costa Rica or the Amazon or Africa. And we discovered there wasn't that much. There wasn't that much written down. There wasn't that many books. There wasn't that many papers on germinating rainforest trees. And so that was pretty interesting. But we did discover some information, and we managed to learn from what other people have learned and adjusted and adapted and improved our techniques. But basically, you know, we're writing stuff that's never been written before. We thought, you know, we've only got 300, 400, 500 species of rainforest trees in this area, whereas the Amazon has thousands. And you would think that there would be a lot of academics and a lot of nurseries around the world growing millions of rainforest trees and learning a lot more quicker, faster techniques that we have. But no, well, there isn't.
Well, yeah, I think there might be like some inverse correlation between like people who like doing seed propagation and people who like using technology
Yeah.
to record what they're doing. You know, I'm sure there's so many people working on stuff, but
there's a lot of it's academic, and a lot of it's studying rainforest and studying seeds and studying how rainforests work, but not actually germinating them and growing them, planting.
Yeah, so there's very little of that sort of practical aspect to the way rainforests are grown and how they grow. And realistically, most of the techniques that we use, we're basically mimicking what happens in the natural world out there in nature, in the forest. So we become fairly expert in knowing how the trees fruit, what the fruits are like, how they fall, how long they take to germinate. And a lot of the techniques, as I say, we use, we're attempting just to mimic what happens in nature. But obviously, we can take much better care of the seeds in a nursery situation. A lot of them aren't going to get eaten by possums or kangaroos or birds. A lot of them aren't going to dry out and desiccate and die. A lot of them aren't going to get too wet and rot. So we're able to use those natural techniques that trees, species have developed over countless millennia to facilitate their germination and allow them to grow.
And try and speed them up
But what we're doing is we're mimicking that, we're safeguarding the material, and we're trying to speed it up. So we might have some seeds that could take 3, 4, 5 years to germinate because they've got a really hard coating on them. And it's not a bad evolutionary technique to develop, that you sit there and you just gradually rot down in the forest until one day your seed coating's thin enough and you germinate. Well, we might put seeds like that into a blender and blend them for a minute or two and break up the hard coating a little. Or we might get some seeds. There's a few seeds, particularly in Australia, not many rainforest seeds, but there's some seeds in Australia, a lot of seeds that need to be, the pods or the fruits need to be actually burnt before the seeds will germinate. There's a lot of seeds that need to sit for a couple of years and mature. And so we're just trying to hasten those aspects of the way they germinate and improve on them and safeguard them in a nursery situation.
It honestly sounds amazing. It like the way you describe it, and like mimicking nature and you know, and sort of looking at how it happens and then trying to mimic that. It sounds so exciting. It sounds so exciting. I would love it I would love to read the book one day and have a go at it, because it sounds like such a hands-on possibility, which is so exciting. Tell us a little bit, guys, about why, and Steve's already described a lot of this, but what are some of the most hardest to germinate seeds? What species, find it so, are so difficult to germinate because of the time frame or specific conditions they need? What are some of your favorites or some of your more difficult candidates that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, we could do the white beech. It's always a good one. So you get the white beech fruit is bright blue and about this big, and you collect a couple of bin loads, like half a ute load full, and you put it wrap it up in shade cloth and put it on the driveway and drive over it about 50 times, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and that removes the flesh from the fruit. And there's a very hard stone that the car doesn't crush. And so then you blast it with a hose, try to remove all the flesh so you're left with a hard stone. And then you get that hard stone and you dry it for a few months until you get little hairline cracks, ideally. But you can also, and then you put it in like a compost, like say half compost, half seed, and you leave that out where it's warm, and you keep it moist but not too wet. And that's like mimicking nature that we were talking about. And then that allows the water to get in, and the seed then expands, pops the little cap off, and it germinates. And so that process takes like maybe 6 months to 9 months. And when they start germinating, we sow them all and they all come up. So that took us about 5 or 10 years to work out.
In nature, that process of gradually desiccating, cracking up, breaking down, finally getting moisture into it, and then allowing the seed to germinate, that could take 2 or 3 years in nature. So we're sort of mimicking that process, but we're fast tracking it so that it's just much more productive for us in a nursery environment, and we can get the trees growing much more quickly that way.
And what about red ash?
Yeah, there's one of the really common trees around here, red ash. It's virtually in every patch of rainforest all up and down the east coast, and it's got a tiny little seed about match head size with a very hard red coating. They sit there presenting on the outer branches of the trees, hoping birds usually take them, swallow them, pass them out into the bush, and they might sit there for a few years. So what we do is we get the seeds, we collect them, we separate them from the material that they're surrounded by, the seed coating, hard fruit part, and then we put them in a container and tip boiling water on them. And that generally, with most hard Australian seeds, that boiling water cracks the casing slightly. And so we'll let them just sit in that water for a half an hour or so, cool down. And then I'll stick them in a blender. So your normal old-fashioned kitchen blender, we'll put them all in that, turn the blender on for 30 seconds, blend them up, and that further cracks the seed coating. Then we just sow them in a tray and they come up within a few weeks. And I guess normally if you didn't do anything to those seeds, they might take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to come up. They just sit there in the bushland waiting for a chance to germinate and grow.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way that, this is where that kind of knowledge is how these guys have come about that knowledge by experimenting and experience and over the years. But there is a bit of a chapter in here on biology, seed biology, and it sort of goes through exactly what is a fruit and what is a seed, and so you know what exactly are you looking at. And it also talks about dormancy. So there's a kind of public idea of what is dormant. A dormant seed's just asleep, but actually it means that dormant seed might not have. It might be waiting to mature, or it might have some kind of chemical inhibitors. Might be something going on inside the seed that's stopping it from germinating. But a lot of seeds aren't dormant. They're just kind of waiting for water, as it were, inside a hard seed coat or inside a woody fruit layer. And so reading that biology chapter and actually understanding what you're looking at. Am I looking at a fruit? Am I looking at a seed? What layers am I looking at? Is it just that it needs water, or does it need more time to grow? Inside, the embryo needs more time to mature so it can crack through the seed coat. It kind of helps you a little bit to sort of use a bit of a process of elimination to know what processes you could try using these seeds. So trying to get people to think a little bit about nature, about what seeds do in nature to germinate or to delay germination, and and then use some of the information in the book to kind of work out their own techniques, because this sort of captures a moment in time, and there's a few species in here that are still mysteries, and it would be so great to have people trying to add to information to hopefully the next edition.
And some of the techniques that we use now may be the best we've got at the moment, but we or other people out there could potentially find a technique that's much more efficient, and we'd be very happy to use that as a future technique for our own purposes. So there's everything in nature. There's so much we don't know, and I guess that's part of why we're destroying the planet, because we don't seem to know what we're doing.
Yes, that's a very beautiful way of explaining it, guys, and I feel that this is a good challenge. If people are willing to get the book and have a look, there are so many people that love a good challenge, and I think that's the possibility that this book and how you describe it's meant to be used potentially has this it becomes this unbelievable resource for the world to start looking at seed propagation and how difficult it is and how much we need to speed it up because of the fact that we're losing so much forest. And yes, we don't even understand what we're losing. One of the other questions I had with relation sort of to that in a sort of kind of a way is the fact that, like, I would like to ask how many of your trees that you know of, that you've studied, that you've researched, are actually distributed and used by birds and other animals? What are some of the animals that eat these seeds, and how essential are they in distribution of these seeds?
That's you, Steve. Is it or me?
Yeah,
well, there's rainforest in the subtropics is eaten by a whole range of animals, but there's also wind disperses seed. We have wind dispersed seed like red cedar. We also have water dispersed seed, so blue quandongs float down the creek and black beans float down the creek. But the animals, a lot of them are birds. We have birds on the ground. We have various animals that eat from the ground, but generally it's a bird-driven distribution. And we have a lot of pigeons, fruit pigeons, that eat our fruit, and the fruits of rainforest trees are designed specifically for these pigeons and other birds, but a lot of the pigeons to eat them. We've lost the cassowaries, who knows, tens of thousands of years ago, that used to eat the bigger fruits. So some of the fruits are too big for our birds to eat. The cassowaries are long gone from here. We have big pigeons that can eat quite large fruit. There's endless figs that attract a whole range of species. Figs being, almost a keystone species in that way, that they attract so many species. And before we, destroyed 90% of the rainforest down here, we supported huge populations of pigeons and bats that, in particular, that flew around and ate a lot of the fruit. So that's increasing now. We are significantly changing the landscape by planting tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of rainforest trees in this area, particularly the big scrub. And we are increasing the populations of the fauna that eats the rainforest fruits.
I guess in the past, the agents that move seeds around weren't as necessary in the bigger picture and over a larger area than they are now, because the big scrub was this vast area of rainforest, subtropical rainforest in the northeastern New South Wales, like 100 kilometres across, a huge area. And when that was completely extant, when it was untouched before European settlers cut it all down, the distribution of seeds wasn't anywhere near as important as it is now, because the whole area was forest, and so birds and other creatures moved the seeds around by eating them. But because it was all forest, there were very few gaps, very few areas that actually needed recruitment on a continuing basis. But since the huge area of the big scrub was cleared, like over 95% of it was cleared, there's been these vast areas that have been used as grazing areas for cattle, mostly for sugarcane, for a lot of agricultural pursuits. Now a lot of that land is being regrown as rainforest. As Mark was talking about earlier, this is a huge industry now, the rainforest re-established and revegetation. And now the birds are playing a really important role in that, because the more little patches there are, the more birds and other creatures that can be provided for with food, and the more those seeds get moved around, and the more species are added to each of those remnants, to each of those patches, to each of those plantations, so that birds have become a really important agent in adding to the species varieties and the species numbers and the total tree numbers that are now regenerating naturally and with human assistance throughout the whole region here. So the birds, as Mark said, the birds are the main agents for that, and it's you can really see it happening naturally, not just us planting trees, but it's coming back naturally. And in the long term, if we can survive as a planet, the rainforest is going to win, and we're going to have a big area of rainforest coming back again. So let's hope that continues.
Yeah.
That's my dream. That's my dream, guys. I so love forest. It's like the pinnacle of what biodiversity sort of means to me, you know. And Mark, when you said before about fig trees being a keystone species, I've read this wonderful book called God's Wasps and Stranglers by a fig ecologist or rainforest ecologist with a special interest in figs. And, you know, I'd like to know how many fig tree species do we have in Australia or in your region? Because I understand that because of their fruiting capacity and the amount of animals they actually feed, amount of birds, they kind of, just by planting them, you can literally grow a forest around them because the birds will come, eat the fig and poo out other forest seeds. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's 9 species that are natural to this northeast coast region, 9 species of figs. But there's several other species that have been introduced here and planted in parks and gardens and as street trees. So figs are an important component of street plantings throughout our history of settlement. And overall in Australia, there's probably about 20, 25 species of figs. So there's not a huge diversity of species compared to probably the more tropical areas of Asia. But in terms of their importance as a component of our rainforests, they're one of the most important things, really, aren't they?
Yeah. And it's only 25 species of figs.
I don't know, but
I thought there were more, but they're like a keystone species that feed a huge number. And yes, we could plant more figs. We always, when we're getting orders out for say 1,000 trees, we always put in 20, 30, 50 figs. But you know, why don't we put in 100 figs or 200 figs? They're a bit slow growing, and so they take a long time to fruit. And you know, 100 figs is a lot of figs in a 1,000 tree planting, that's for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
So guys,
But
also
definitely. Yeah, go on.
No, I was just going to ask. I lost my train of thought now, but fig trees just magnificent and so able to retrieve nutrients and water from the most obscure places. You know, when you see them growing on rocks and stuff, and fascinating creatures. In terms of your book, how many species of trees are there listed in how to crack them to grow?
That's you, Michelle.
There's 300 subtropical rainforest trees species that are in the book, and some shrubs too. Yeah, in the book.
And there's probably 450. There's another 150 that we didn't put in because we don't know the information well enough. And then there's another 500 in North Queensland that could be added to it in the future.
Yeah, and that's one of the main things that I was excited about to come and work with Firewheel, because Mark and the whole team at Firewheel are just really dedicated to having really the most diverse suite of species that they can manage. Whereas I think other nurseries tend to grow what they know or grow what's easiest, what comes up. And so, you know, with the increase in restoration projects, there's a lot of trees growing out. And so if, you know, the more diversity, the better, I guess. And so we're just hoping that this book will, you know, other nursery owners and workers will be reading it, and it'll increase the suite, the diversity of the species that are in all the other nurseries as well. And so all the bush regen plantings that are going on will have more diversity, and because that's really important. And also it's important to keep rainforest species in circulation, so to speak, because the most interesting thing probably that I learned in this whole process was that about 2/3 of rainforest species are recalcitrant, which means that they hold a lot of moisture, amongst other things. But the seeds hold a lot of moisture, and so for that reason they can't be dried out or frozen and stored in the seed bank. There's a big seed bank down in Sydney and another one in Canberra, but those recalcitrant species can't be banked, and so there's kind of no plan B, whereas all the acacias and eucalypts and hard, dry, oily seeds can be banked. And so if we have a big fire, you know, we can go and get those seeds and do restoration. But our recalcitrant rainforest species are quite vulnerable. Some of them aren't. Some of them there's, you know, they're not rare or endangered or anything. But some are, and so it's trying to keep everything in circulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. That sounds very important, guys. And the work that you've done is going to serve Australia's future, because it might be the only way to save Australia's rainforests, you know. And I'm glad to hear that there are a lot of restoration projects happening. And I hope from this book you encourage, as you say, nurseries to diversify their seed bank, but also for people at home to just go out there and try it. And it must be so much fun. I imagine kids would love it. So it's a very big shame we didn't get to have your workshop at the planting, because it would have been really exciting to have people do it and get their hands dirty. So maybe we could go out into your nursery now and have a look how some of the processes happen, if you want to share.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Kids love growing plants and growing them themselves and then planting them themselves. Kids love that. And I've been involved with various projects with Greening Australia and school projects, and you always have such fun. Kids just love being part of those projects. So it's something for everyone, not just adults. Everyone can be participating in this vital necessity these days, getting more trees in the ground.
So are we going to walk
Yeah,
around?
and there's lots of cool. If anybody's watching who's interested in the Big Scrub, you can go onto is it bigscrublancair.org? Yeah, and there's lots of events happening and ways to support the rainforest restoration in this area. Yeah, or you can always drop into Firewheel and get some trees.
I wish I could fly over. I wish I could fly over right now and grab some.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we want to do this now, walk into the nursery.
Oh, let's do it. No.
All right.
Okay,
We can
sure.
try. All right.
Carry me over.
So I'm going to be the videographer.
Yeah.
Be behind the scenes now.
Yay!
A little tour. So this is the seed processing area here. So over here we have a fridge with some seeds in it. And over here we have some stored seeds that are all labelled. And they've got, they're the ones we can keep dry and stored, which most rainforests you can't. Seeds you can't. Some are in the fridge here. Like, what have we got here? We've got pound carragel, and we've got Stenocarpus sinuatus firewheel in the fridge. And and there's plenty of other seeds on the bench here. What have we got here?
Some red ash.
Some red ash there. We're going to torture soon with boiling water and cleaning. We've got some wild macadamia nuts that we are going to crack with a hammer. And then over here we've got the blender we use for blending up seeds in the put the water and the seeds in there and blend it up. We've got sieves.
Yeah.
We've got sieves here, plenty of sieves that we use. They're a bit, you know, technical for backyard people, but you can just buy. These are just water tank sieves that sit in the bottom of a water tank. You get any real dry place, so they're good as well.
And we've even got the grinding wheel. I just processed about 250 of the seeds from the world's rarest tree. That's not going to come up in footage. It's sun.
Too bright.
But on some of those seeds, we used a grinding wheel to grind a nick into their coating because it's so hard to allow the water in. So this is one of the processes that we use where we just float off seeds that the viable good seeds, the ones that we want to sow, they all sink, and all this other, these seeds are mostly no good. They float, all the casings of the fruit floats. So we just put them in a bucket and separate them by flotation and end up with a batch of seeds that we can sow. This is all these pots here. They're all what we call we're just dry composting these things. So a lot of these seeds they're not all large, but a lot of them are got very hard coatings, and they may take up to, well, most of them 18 months. Some of them take longer than that. Some are a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, some even longer. And so we compost them, mostly seeds with a bit of plant material mixed in, and they just sit there in these large pots and buckets and bins for a year or two. We water them every so often just to keep them slightly moist, but it's basically like we were talking before, mimicking what happens in nature, where they're just sitting on the forest floor. They get wet occasionally, they get dry occasionally. They just sit there and gradually break down until the hard coating's broken down enough to crack open and the seed can germinate. Here we can show you some of these where they've just started, so that once they start germinating, then we'll transplant them into another medium and pop them on. So
these are actually germinating in the actual compost here. These are the seeds with the compost, and they've rotted down enough, and then they're starting to germinate. We can pop that up. You can see the seed with the new germinate coming out of it. This here is Davidson plum fruit. Beautiful, squishy Davidson plum fruit, and you get it on the sieve. That's down a bit. Down. Yeah, and you squish it on the sieve like this, and then you get rid of all the flesh, and off comes the seed. Off comes the seed just like that, and we sow the seed.
So we'll hose through that sieve and hose off the material off the seed that we don't want, and then separate the seeds out and sow them.
Down a little bit. So that's it. So the black bean, most people know what a black bean is. A big tree with a big bean pod, and inside the bean pod is beautiful black beans, which were a very important seed source for Aboriginal people down here. They're actually poisonous, but if you crush them and put them in a river or a creek for a couple of days, gets rid of the toxins, and then you can dry them out and use them like flour, make up little Johnny cakes or scones type things. So we get these seeds. We don't put them in trays. We actually put them straight into the pot. So you get the black bean, and you find which is the bum and which is the nipple, and you can see that that's a bit shaped like a bum, and that's a little bit shaped like a nipple. You want to find a better nipple. Oh, there's one already starting.
Oh, it's a hairy nipple.
Yeah, there's a little nipple there. So it's bum up, nipple down. So you put it in like that, and then you don't need to put it in the tray because the root will just go straight down, and the shoot will come up, and Bob your uncle, there's a black bean tree. What else have we got?
Yep. That's pretty good, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So this is
Just
Currajong brachychiton. It was used by people as a food source, and settlers used it to make like baked coffee out of. So these beautiful seeds, and they can sit there for if they're not insect attacked, then they can sit there for ages, 2 or 3 years without affecting the viability of the seed. We just open them up, rats love eating them. So when we sow them into a tray, we have to put these in cages or put mesh over the top of them because the seeds will just get all eaten. So it's a little bit of work having to crack open these really hard seed cases and get the seeds out and sow them. But they're a really important component of rainforests around here, and a really popular tree. Beautiful red flowers on them. But rats love eating the seeds. So just another aspect of nursery management that we have to, as I say, we need to protect these seeds from being eaten. Mark's just got another process that we do here. I'll help you with the bag.
Okay. So this is cabbage tree palm, and so we've soaked the cabbage tree palm in water for a few days, and this is a long process. So they're all still as they were on the tree. We've just taken them off their stalks, and we're going to put them in this plastic bag for 6 months, 9 months.
Yeah, can take up to that.
And we're just going to tip them all in with the water as well. Water's going to come out. Tip them all in. And we're going to wrap these up like this. And we're going to put them away for 9 months, 12 months, until they start germinating. That's called composting. And they're going to actually compost and ferment. So we'll get back to you in 9 months and tell you how they go. Right. That do?
Bit of a wrap up.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah, so there's about, I don't know, we've got about 300 different species in our book, and there's about 10, 20 different techniques that we use. We've developed over the last 20, 30 years, and there's possibly better ways to do it, but we haven't found them yet, and we'll tell you about it when they will. But these are the best tried and true methods that we can come up with. So go for it, guys.
Yeah. Happy sowing.
Happy sowing.
Yeah. Good luck.
Happy germinating.
Yes. Know your trees, grow your trees, sow your seeds.
You guys are awesome. That was the best thing ever. I wish the connection was better because that was such an awesome video. Look, I've learned so much just by watching and listening to you guys. So I can't wait to get the book. Really, honestly, where do we get the book from? How do we order this book of yours?
You can get it from a few places. You can get it from CSIRO Publishing, and you can also get an ebook through them as well. You can get it from Australian Rainforest Publishing, and that's nice because then the profits go to Hugh Nicholson, who donated all of the photos for the book, all 300 of them. You can pop down to Firewheel Nursery in Dunoon here in northern New South Wales, and that way you get to meet Mark and Steve and look at all the trees. And then, yeah, that's good too. Good for us because the profits go to the authors as well. Yeah. And and they're also available in all major bookstores as well. Yeah.
Cool. We'll put up some links for people to have a look how they best want to get the book. But thanks so much, guys. I've had so much fun.
Yeah.
And it's
fun.
fun.
And hopefully we'll be able to do a workshop sometime soon, like woodford or next planting or something somewhere sometime.
Yes, I sincerely hope so. That with everything sort of coming back to a more normal state again, we can definitely do that meetup, have the workshop and give it to people, because it sounds like such a fun thing to do. Thanks so much. I can't thank you enough for showing me your nursery and sharing yourselves, all three of you, and your journeys. And I'm looking forward to our engagement in the future. And in the meantime, we'll have the video ready for people and all the links and things that they can look up and how to get the book. And yeah, thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your presence with us here today.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for giving us a chance to share. It's been great.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sandra.
Can't wait to visit.
Bye, Sandra.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, is that all cool?
Yep, I'm going to stop it now. Thanks so much, Michelle, for organising this for us, and I'll see you soon.